Welcome to today's video, where we'll uncover a pressing issue that could impact your grocery trips. 7 everyday products that are expected to double in price by 2025. That's right, key staples you rely on could see sharp price hikes, and we're here to break down exactly why. From climate challenges affecting crop yields to shifting consumer trends and global economic shifts, every item on this list has a story behind its predicted price jump. Stick with us as we reveal these surprising grocery items and share what you need to know to plan ahead. Starting with number 1, oats and oat-based products, which are set to skyrocket due to unfavorable climate conditions and rising demand. Stay tuned for all the details. 1. Lentils and legumes, why price hikes are unavoidable. Lentils and legumes like chickpeas, black beans, and kidney beans are critical staples in diets all over the globe. These nutrient-packed superfoods are loaded with protein, fiber, and essential vitamins, making them a must-have for health-conscious consumers and communities that rely on them as affordable sources of nutrition. But here's the alarming reality. Lentil and legume prices are skyrocketing and could potentially double by 2025, driven by a perfect storm of environmental, agricultural, and economic challenges. First and foremost, climate change is wreaking havoc on the regions where lentils grow best, countries like Canada, India, and Australia. These areas are increasingly experiencing extreme weather patterns such as intense droughts, irregular rainfall, and fluctuating temperatures, all of which drastically disrupt crop cycles. Lentils are particularly sensitive during the flowering and pod-filling stages of growth, which are crucial for producing a good harvest. Without enough water during these windows, yields plummet and the quality of the crop suffers. It's not just the weather causing trouble. The costs of fertilizers and pesticides, essential tools for maintaining legume farming at a large scale, are skyrocketing as well. Global supply chain disruptions and rising energy prices have made these critical supplies more expensive and, in some cases, hard to find. For farmers, this means higher expenses to grow the same or even smaller amounts of lentils. Labor shortages are making things even tougher. Harvesting legumes is often a labor-intensive process, and regions that depend on manual farm work are struggling to find enough workers. This shortage drives up labor costs, forcing growers to pass those costs on to consumers. Meanwhile, the demand for lentils and legumes is surging. Increasingly, people are turning to plant-based diets as healthier or more sustainable alternatives to meat. Legumes are a top choice for protein in this growing trend. Items like hummus, lentil pasta, and plant-based burgers have exploded in popularity, especially in developed countries. While this shift is great for health and sustainability advocates, the spike in demand puts extra pressure on an already stretched supply. Storage and transportation are also critical problems driving up prices. Lentils need very specific moisture-controlled conditions to avoid mold and spoilage during storage. With rising energy prices, maintaining the proper environment for storage has become costlier than ever. Transportation is just as tricky. The same energy prices that affect storage also impact the cost of shipping legumes across the globe. On top of that, export restrictions in certain countries, aimed at stabilizing domestic food prices, are limiting global supply. Nations that import lentils are now finding it increasingly difficult and expensive to secure these essential foods. Sadly, lentils and legumes are caught in a web of climate struggles, rising costs, labor shortages, and exploding demand. It's no wonder economists predict their prices could double by 2025. For families who rely on these affordable protein sources, the implications are significant, and consumers everywhere need to prepare for the changes ahead. Will lentils remain the budget-friendly pantry staple they've always been, or are they on their way to becoming a luxury item? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. Their future on grocery store shelves is in flux. Number 2, peanuts and peanut butter. Peanuts and peanut butter might be on your grocery list every week, but buckle up. They're on the fast track to becoming a lot more expensive. And here's why. The humble peanut, a pantry staple and key ingredient in peanut butter, is under immense pressure from environmental challenges, rising costs, and surging global demand. Let's dissect what's driving prices through the roof and why this beloved food could burn a hole in your wallet by 2025. To start, peanuts are incredibly sensitive to weather conditions. They need just the right balance of warm temperatures and steady rainfall to thrive. But that balance has been thrown off by climate change. Major peanut-producing regions like the southeastern United States and parts of Africa have been hit hard by prolonged droughts and unpredictable rainfall patterns. A brief dry spell during critical times like flowering or pod formation can ruin an entire season's crop. To combat these challenges, farmers are investing in high-tech irrigation systems to keep their fields watered. While these systems help mitigate the risk, they also come with hefty upfront and maintenance costs, all of which trickle down to consumers. On top of climate stress, peanuts are fighting their own battle against pests and diseases. Fungal diseases such as leaf spot and the dreaded aflatoxin contamination have become more widespread due to rising temperatures and increased humidity. Aflatoxin is particularly nasty. It's a toxin that can develop in peanuts under certain conditions, and any contaminated peanuts are unfit for human consumption. Farmers are now spending more time and money on treatments like fungicides and strict crop monitoring to ensure only safe and quality peanuts make it to market. But these protective measures pile even more onto the production costs. And guess who ends up paying for it at the checkout counter? That's right, you! Then there's the booming demand for peanuts and peanut butter, thanks to their growing status as a popular source of plant-based protein. Health-conscious diets are on the rise, and peanuts are celebrated for being nutrient-rich, packed with healthy fats, fiber, and protein. Peanut butter, in particular, isn't just for sandwiches anymore. It's found everywhere, from breakfast smoothies to protein snacks and even trendy vegan recipes. With more people reaching for jars of peanut butter, the pressure on the peanut supply chain is intense, and prices are climbing as a result. Labor and shipping costs also play a significant role here. Peanut farming is labor-intensive, especially in regions where harvesting is still done by hand. Even in the United States, where much of the farming process is mechanized, high fuel costs, equipment maintenance expenses, and fluctuating wages are all driving up prices. For countries that rely heavily on peanut imports, global tariffs and export restrictions add another layer of complications, further inflating costs. And it doesn't stop there. Packaging costs are skyrocketing too. Peanut butter jars, whether glass or specialized airtight plastic, have seen price hikes due to supply chain disruptions and rising raw material costs. For manufacturers, that's yet another expense, which ends up pushing retail prices higher. By 2025, your favorite jar at the store could be almost double the price you're paying now. Number 3, coconuts and coconut-based products. Coconuts and coconut-based products are facing a storm of challenges that could send prices skyrocketing by 2025. If you've noticed your coconut milk, oil, or sugar getting more expensive, you're not alone. This critical crop is under significant pressure, and the reasons might surprise you. First off, coconuts don't grow overnight. A coconut tree takes a whopping 5 to 7 years before it starts producing fruit, and it doesn't hit peak productivity until it's about 15 years old. Unfortunately, many of the coconut trees in major producing countries like the Philippines and Indonesia are now far past their prime. These aging trees produce fewer coconuts and need to be replaced, but the process of replanting new trees is both time-consuming and expensive. Farmers must invest heavily in cultivating new crops, which slows down production and drives prices higher in the short term. Then there's the issue of pests and diseases, which are taking a toll on coconut production. Climate change is shifting ecosystems in unpredictable ways, leaving coconut trees vulnerable to destructive pests like the coconut rhinoceros beetle. These beetles burrow into trees and damage them so severely that their ability to produce fruit is drastically reduced. On top of that, diseases like lethal yellowing are spreading through tropical regions, causing trees to wither and die entirely within just a few weeks. Combating these issues requires costly pest and disease management efforts, further increasing production costs. But that's not all. Farmers are also facing mounting pressure to meet growing consumer demands for sustainably sourced and ethically produced goods. While seeing fair trade and sustainability labels on your favorite coconut products might give you peace of mind, those certifications come with a cost. Farmers must adapt their practices to meet environmental standards, pay fair wages, and follow rigorous harvesting guidelines. That means even more financial investment into inspections, certifications, and upgrading their processes and equipment, all of which get passed on to the price tag. Finally, the complexity of processing coconuts into the versatile products we love, like oil, milk, flour, and sugar, adds yet another layer of cost. Each product requires specific labor-intensive techniques. For instance, producing virgin coconut oil uses a cold press extraction method to preserve nutrients, but the process is highly time-consuming and demands expertise. Meanwhile, coconut sugar isn't even made from the actual fruit, it comes from the sap of the coconut tree, which requires skillful collection and processing. All of these steps add to the overall expense of getting coconut-based products onto grocery store shelves. 4. Oats might be pricey in the future. Here's why. If oats are a staple in your morning routine or plant-based diet, you might want to brace yourself because the cost of this humble grain may skyrocket in the coming years. The rising demand for oats, fueled by the explosion of oat-based products like oat milk, snacks, and protein bars, is putting immense pressure on the industry. Oat milk has become a star player in the dairy alternative world, with consumers flocking to it as a healthy and sustainable choice. However, this increased popularity is reshaping the oat market, creating competition between trendy processed products and traditional uses like breakfast oatmeal and baking ingredients. Supply chains are being stretched to their limits, and prices are feeling the heat. It's not just demand that's making waves in the oat industry. Mother Nature is playing her part too. Oats thrive in cooler climates, with the majority of production coming from Canada, the US, and parts of Europe. Unfortunately, changing weather patterns have thrown a curveball at farmers. Extreme temperature swings and prolonged droughts are starting to take a toll, particularly in Canada, one of the biggest oat producers. With droughts limiting water availability, crop yields are shrinking, and the oats that are harvested often lack the size and nutrient composition they once had. This isn't just bad news for farmers. Smaller and weaker grains mean higher expenses to maintain the necessary nutritional standards that consumers expect. To combat these challenges, farmers are being forced to invest in costly solutions. From advanced irrigation systems to experimenting with alternative crops, these measures drive up production costs significantly. At the same time, oats require careful storage and processing, as their grains are especially sensitive to both moisture levels and pests. Specialized storage facilities with climate control are essential, but maintaining them has become increasingly expensive. Rising global energy costs make it even harder to keep up with these demands. And when storage and processing expenses increase, those costs eventually get passed on to consumers. Another layer of complexity arises from the way oats are being used. Oat milk, granola bars, instant oatmeal packets, and other oat-based snacks aren't just popular. They also require more elaborate processing, packaging, and shipping systems. Each additional step in the production line adds to overall costs. With transportation fees surging due to higher fuel prices, these processed oat products could see some of the steepest price hikes. This means that products we've come to enjoy as budget-friendly options may soon feel like a luxury. Whether you swear by a bowl of oatmeal to start your day or rely on oat milk for your morning coffee, these ongoing challenges paint a worrying picture for the future of oats. Prices could rise significantly as production costs continue to climb, leaving consumers to bear the financial burden. If you're a fan of oats, you may want to savor their affordability while it lasts, because by 2025, even this versatile grain could strain your grocery budget. Number 5. Wine. You're probably going to want to savor that glass of wine a little more, because it might cost you a whole lot more by 2025. That's right. Wine prices are skyrocketing, and there are some very clear reasons why. First off, vineyards are grappling with water scarcity, especially in key wine-producing regions like California, Spain, and Italy. With droughts becoming a recurring issue, wineries now depend heavily on advanced irrigation systems to keep their grapes thriving. Drip irrigation, for instance, is one way to get water right where it's needed, one vine at a time. But here's the catch. These systems are expensive to set up and maintain, and as water becomes pricier, the overall cost of wine production climbs. And it's not just the water crisis pushing up prices. Consumer preferences are shifting, and people increasingly want organic and biodynamic wines. Sure, going organic sounds great. No synthetic pesticides, no harsh chemicals. But what you may not realize is how much effort and time this transition actually takes. Vineyards need to recover their soil from years of conventional farming. They have to pass rigorous inspections to get certified, and pest control. That's now a lot more manual labor. Vineyards often rely on hand-picking pests or bringing in natural predators instead of using chemical sprays, which all adds to the cost. By the time that organic label is slapped on the bottle, the price tag reflects years of hard work and investment. Now let's talk about technology. High-tech gadgets are revolutionizing winemaking, but they're also a big reason wine will cost more soon. Wineries are using tools like drones, satellite imaging, and data analytics to monitor the health of their vines and even detect diseases early. Sure, these methods lead to better grape quality, but they don't come cheap. Add to that the high cost of automated fermentation chambers, bottling systems, and even systems that regulate temperatures to adapt to unpredictable climates. All these advancements boost the wine's flavor and consistency, but they take a massive chunk out of the winery's budget before that bottle even hits store shelves. Climate change is an even bigger curveball. Some wineries are experimenting with planting hardier grape varieties that can survive rising temperatures, changing weather patterns, pests, and diseases. It sounds like a smart long-term strategy, but developing and testing these new grape types can take years, sometimes decades. Not to mention, uprooting old vines to plant new ones significantly impacts yield, and wineries have to take financial hits until those fresh vines are strong enough to produce quality grapes. And unfortunately, all these costs trickle down to the consumer. You guessed it. That's us. Lastly, the cost of international trade and tariffs adds another layer to the price hike. Imported wines are often slapped with hefty duties and taxes, especially in regions with tight trade restrictions. If you're sipping on a bottle imported from Europe, those rising fees are probably baked right into the price. Even for wineries that depend on exports for their revenue, higher tariffs mean they have no choice but to increase their prices to compensate. Number 6, maple syrup. Maple syrup, that golden, sweet delight drizzled on pancakes and waffles, could soon cost you a lot more than you might expect. But why is the humble bottle of maple syrup potentially doubling in price? The answer lies in a mixture of climate change, supply challenges, and skyrocketing production costs, making maple syrup the 6th product on our list of grocery items set to rise steeply in price by 2025. First, let's talk about the trees themselves. Maple syrup comes from the sap of maple trees, a natural and time-sensitive process that is highly dependent on the weather. Maple trees need cold nights followed by warmer days to produce sap in plentiful amounts. However, as global temperatures rise due to climate change, winters have become shorter and less predictable. This disrupts the sap flow season, which is shrinking year after year. Less sap means less syrup, and producers are fighting hard to keep up with demand. Another issue is the long wait time for maple trees to mature. Did you know it takes about 40 years for a maple tree to grow big enough to produce a meaningful amount of sap? That's right. It's not like you can just plant some new trees today and start harvesting maple syrup next season. While global demand for this natural sweetener continues to surge, especially in countries like the United States, Canada, and even across Asia and Europe, the slow growth rate of maple trees limits how quickly producers can scale up their operations. Combine that with increasing risks from pests like the Asian long-horned beetle, which damages maple trees and reduces sap production, and you've got a recipe for restricted supply. Now let's talk about production. Making maple syrup is anything but simple. It's labor-intensive and time-consuming. Producers must collect sap from trees, then boil it down in sugar shacks to achieve that rich, sticky consistency we all know and love. This process is energy-intensive. It takes about 40 liters of sap to produce just 1 liter of syrup. Rising fuel prices have hit producers hard, increasing the cost of boiling the sap, which eats into profits and ultimately leads to higher prices for consumers like you. The global export market adds another layer of complexity. Canada, the world's largest maple syrup producer, exports massive quantities to countries worldwide. Demand for Canadian maple syrup is especially soaring in Europe and Asia, and this puts even more pressure on limited supplies. Supply chain challenges, think transport delays, higher shipping costs, and increased export fees, further contribute to rising prices. But here's the kicker. Maple syrup isn't just an occasional indulgence anymore. More people are turning to it as a natural sweetener alternative, especially as the popularity of organic and minimally processed foods grows. The demand keeps rising, but the supply just can't keep pace. All of these factors, climate issues, slow tree growth, pest threats, challenging production, rising fuel costs, and growing export demand, are coming together to potentially double the price of a bottle of maple syrup by 2025. Number 7, potatoes. Potatoes are a staple food in households around the world, but their days as an affordable grocery item may soon be over. The cost of growing and distributing potatoes has been steadily increasing due to a combination of agricultural, logistical, and market challenges that are shaking up the industry. One of the biggest culprits? A microscopic but destructive pest called the potato cyst nematode. These tiny invaders attack potato roots, reducing yields and leaving fields infertile for years. The worst part? They can survive in the soil for up to a decade, and fighting them isn't cheap. Farmers are forced to rotate crops over extended periods, sometimes for years, which limits their ability to grow potatoes consistently. To manage infestations, they either need pricey nematicides or must explore innovative breeding techniques to produce pest-resistant potatoes, both of which come with substantial costs and time-intensive research. Speaking of breeding new potato varieties, this is no walk in the park. Traditional potato strains are particularly vulnerable to a wide range of diseases and pests, leaving farmers constantly on the back foot. Developing new resistant varieties can take a decade or more, involving countless hours of testing, research, and field trials. And all those efforts? They aren't cheap. The cost of producing better, disease-resistant potatoes gets passed down the chain, reflected most obviously in the price you pay for certified seed potatoes. Because potatoes are genetically complex, they pose extra challenges compared to other crops. This slower and more labor-intensive development process makes maintaining or increasing yields a constant battle for farmers. Then, there's the issue of regulations. Around the world, governments are tightening the rules on which chemicals can be used in agriculture, and potatoes are no exception. Farmers are now required to either adopt eco-friendly pest solutions or dramatically reduce their reliance on traditional pesticides and herbicides, especially for potatoes bound for human consumption. For example, in the European Union, many long-standing agrochemical options have been banned. While these regulations protect the environment, they also force farmers to turn to less effective and more expensive alternatives. This shift increases the cost of cultivation, which, surprise, gets passed on to consumers. Finally, don't forget the challenges of getting potatoes from field to table. Unlike other crops, potatoes are highly perishable and require careful handling to prevent bruising, sprouting, or spoilage. This means specialized packaging, temperature-controlled storage, and precise transportation logistics are a must. Rising fuel prices have made long-distance transport especially costly, putting an additional squeeze on suppliers. Additionally, recent disruptions in global supply chains, from the pandemic to geopolitical conflicts, have forced many producers to invest in costly storage upgrades and cooling infrastructure to minimize losses. All of these hidden costs impact the shelf price. Potatoes may seem basic, but the challenges facing this humble crop are anything but. All these factors are setting the stage for potato prices to spike dramatically in the coming years. If you think they're expensive now, just wait until 2025. Conclusion: it's clear that our grocery bills are poised to climb significantly in the coming years. And these 7 products, maple syrup, potatoes, and others, are just the tip of the iceberg. From climate change and pest invasions to supply chain disruptions and rising fuel costs, a perfect storm of challenges is driving up prices across the board. While these issues may seem out of our control, they highlight the importance of supporting sustainable agricultural practices, reducing food waste, and staying informed about the factors shaping our global food economy. By understanding the complexities behind these rising costs, consumers can make more mindful choices and adapt to what could be a very different grocery landscape in 2025.